Welcome to Storytime Podcast, everyone. This has been a very odd beginning, but we're having some fun. How's everybody doing?
Welcome to Storytime. I'm here with CJ again.
What up?
One thing I also would like to say on the show, and I don't know why I stroke CJ's ego because I've known him forever, and I know he's obnoxious about his ego. But I was FaceTiming my parents, and who obviously know and love you. And we were talking about the podcast. And my mom, they go in order, and obviously the only one we have released from when we're recording this with you has been Brandon McGee.
Right.
Very awesome person. Highly recommend that episode for everyone.
True.
But my mom was like, you know what? I'm going to skip some episodes and watch this one because CJ's on
it. It's always been known that your parents like me better than they like you, which is true.
That is absolutely not true.
It is. It is.
They're going to hear this and call me and be like, that is not true.
They love me to death because they kept you alive through college.
Yes. I know I gave CJ the intro in the beginning just for everyone out there, but CJ is like my big brother. We've known each other since whatever ASU's incoming freshman program message board thing.
Devil to devil, the worst.
Yes, that's where we first met because we had a mutual friend, Tyson.
Right. Yes,
he was my cheer coach. You cheered with him.
Yeah.
And so, before we even got on campus, we had been connected and talking, and you have been there through the embarrassing moments. You have caused most of the embarrassing moments. And
a good time.
And now, a decade later, basically, here we are.
We're getting old.
So, who do we have on the show today, CJ?
We have someone who is a pioneer in her field. We have someone who has a doctorate. We have someone who has done something that very few after her have done. We have Ms. Dr. Jen Welter. She is the first ever female NFL coach, the first ever female to be in a Madden game. She has a BS from Boston College, has 2 higher education degrees past that. Can't wait to talk to her. She's dope. And she's also one of the funniest humans in the history of mankind. I was watching videos earlier, and my mom walks by and she goes, "Is this the person you're interviewing?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "She is really, really funny." And before she comes on, I'm gonna see if I can find this video because.
Oh yeah, can you see her in the waiting room, or is that only me?
I think that's probably only you. Is she in the waiting room?
All right. Yeah, she just came in. So. What? You're gonna do the video?
I'll literally play this as she's coming on. That's fine.
All right. Well, everyone, we're gonna go to break really quick. We're gonna meet Dr. Jen Welter, and we will be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back. We are here with a legend, one of the most interesting, amazing, funniest, if you don't follow her on social media, please do, for her videos. People in the world, Dr. Jen Welter. How are you?
Well, right now I'm feeling blinded. I don't know what it is, but it's this ring bling that's going on down here. And I just can't take my eyes off it because, I like rings, and I like rings for different reasons. So for those of y'all who don't know it, championship rings, these big ones that we wear, they're not just big to be big. We do like that too because, hey, size matters. For those of you who said it doesn't, that's a lie. Size does matter. So that's important. But the thing that you get also with the size, especially in those rings, is you get a story. That's what makes all of the rings so special. So when I see it, it's not just, ooh, it's pretty, and I'm checking his size to make sure he's working with something, but it's actually, I want to know the story. So now that I know I have thoroughly embarrassed you, because you're now hiding behind the ring. We're not, he was doing this and then he went to this.
Always
yep, it wasn't, oh, nice to meet you.
It wasn't nice to meet you. It was nice to meet you. Look.
Exactly. So let's hear the story because that is a beautiful pitchfork on the ring.
It is. So this story actually, oddly enough, all roads lead back to Courtney in this situation. So in 2011, I go to ASU and I had my mindset on walking on and playing at ASU, right? kind of delusion, but so it goes. And so I show up and I start working out, and I, you know, try out for the coaches, never hear anything, you know, and then eventually they're like, yeah, you know, we don't need you, which made sense because they had an entire defensive line, including Will Sutton, who was, you know, Pac-12 Rookie of the Year, and things like that, played for the whatever. And so, you know, I was sitting there and I was feeling kind of dejected. And so then Courtney was like, well, they just got this new coach, so you probably should just go and they have open practice, so just go and watch. And I was like, no, I was like, I don't want to just stand out there and do nothing.
Wait, but go ahead. Let me interrupt you. Tell everyone what your height is. That's what makes you stand out at practice.
So at that point in time, like I'm 6'5". At that point in time, I was like 325-ish pounds.
He got attention everywhere he went.
Up. I will find something to do with you, big boy. Okay? Look, I have coached in the trenches. That's what I do. I'm like, come to me.
No,
that was the reaction that he got from Coach Todd Graham.
I did.
To me.
But you wouldn't believe, though, because going into this process, you know, I hadn't played since high school. And so I was, I don't know, 21 years old. I walked into a bunch of different programs, including right down the street, my home program, the University of Washington. And I had their head coach at the time look me dead in my eyes and say, what are you doing here? And I remember that, and I was like, oh, this is dope. Cool. So I get back to ASU, and Courtney and I are, you know, going to these practices, and then I end up going every single day. And these coaches are like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm just a guy. And they're like, you're a big guy. And I go, I'm just a guy. And they go, do you play football? And I go, I am a guy that plays football. And then all of a sudden I'm in New York at a conference, and I get a phone call from Coach Wren, who I think has since retired. And he was like, see you on Wednesday. We want you in for your physical. And the next thing you know, I was, you know, getting beat up on practice squad for an entire year. But in the end, and tore my ACL halfway through the season, which was dope. But in the end, we go on to win a bowl, and it's the Kraft Fight Against Hunger Bowl, beat Navy 62 to like 28. And yeah, we got one of these.
I love it. You know, it's so interesting. People, they like, and having coached, it's funny that I'm wearing a Legends shirt today because, you know, I'm always the one who's like, so much talent gets missed. Right. Whether it's you just don't fit on the box. I don't know. I mean, nobody was scouting me out at practice. I'm just going to let you know, because being 5'2", I was never the one that somebody looked at and was like, oh my gosh, you'll be one of the best football players in the world one day. It did not happen. Okay. Right. If I was 6'5", I'd be setting records of like mass destruction. But, but so much talent gets missed because of systems, of not knowing, you know, how to get your tape to the right people, of, you know, roster depth or school ideals as opposed to where you could play, and so much of that stuff. And I've seen it time and time again, right? Like there's so much talent that you know, you do have to stay hungry. Like I tell people, I'm like, if you believe it, go get in the face, like let them see you. Because I've even been in situations, and like, so when I was at the Legends, since it's top of mind, we had a guy, I started with them with linebackers and then ended up getting moved to the D-line because they had like a coaching shift. But we had a great guy on that team, Keyshawn Freeman, who we had playing like we were running a 4-3, and they had him at an outside linebacker, which was coverage heavy. Well, he hadn't had to do a lot of cover before, but he had a nose for the football, right? He made the most tackles in my scrimmage, and having been a D-line linebackers person, but our defensive coordinator at that time was a secondary guy. So it was like rubbing his nerves that he might've been a half a shade here and there. And I'm like, but the guy's a ball player, right? Like, and so when they asked me to switch from D-line to linebacker, I said, I'll go, but give me him.
Right.
And it turns out that's essentially what he had done at Georgia Tech when he played. You know, he was more of a rush end. And then when he went to the Saints, he was a 3-4 outside, but still a rush. So they had him in the wrong position group. Turned out to be, you know, one of our highest graded players on tape, a great player for us, and then went on to play in the XFL. But if you're not like recognizing talent and literally, I mean, I stood up on the table for him. Like I said, I will do that if you give me him.
Right.
Just let me try it. If it doesn't work, I can't do anything for it. But it's hard. Like coaching systems are tough. And that was one of the first lessons I learned. So believe it or not, people don't know this. When I got my master's, after I finished, I was getting players referred to me to help them get like mentally ready for combine and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I realized I had a blind spot because though I was a great player in women's football, you know, we didn't have that same process. So I'd never had to go through the combine or writing a scouting report or any of that. And so I felt like I wasn't able to give them the advice that I would if I had been on that side of talent assessment. Mm-hmm. So I went to Sports Management Worldwide. I did research, found out there were courses in scouting and general manager, signed up for one, not doing it like thinking I wanted to be a coach or I'm sorry. Well, I didn't know about a coach at that point, but like a GM or scout, but I wanted to understand it so I could break down the process to like my guys. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, they freaking had never had a girl before. So I get a call from the university. I'm not even thinking about this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying I want to do it, right? Like, but I've been playing ball forever. Like, I just want to know how you guys speak it, right? Mm-hmm. Get a call from the president of the university. I always told them we'd have a girl. And I'm like, okay, right? The biggest question they had was, would I be able to not just assess, but would I stand on the table for guys? Or would I get bullied out of my assessments? And I was like, oh, well, clearly we've never met. You know, once I got through that, it was a great advantage. Ended up driving my dissertation for my PhD, which I wrote on the NFL's use of the Wonderlic in the scouting process, because, you know, I was like, what is this test? You're telling me it does all these things and I have a master's in sports psychology and I've never heard of it. I don't believe you, first off. And second of all, why is it coming up in scouting reports when people were writing them? Because, you know, you're reading other people's and they'd be like, oh, well, we don't really look at it anyway. And then I'd be like, okay, but then why am I looking in when you're grading player intelligence, right? Like, you know, does he have football IQ, all that stuff? And you say, really intuitive player, smart decisions, angle pursuit, da-da-da-da-da, in direct contrast with low Wonderlic score. Okay, so you're doubting what you saw on tape because of a 50-question, 12-minute timed intelligence test that is essentially a short form of the SAT. You're going to tell me a short form of the SAT is going to tell me who can ball or not? No, I have a problem with this test. So it ended up informing a lot of what I did and who I was, just because I wanted to understand that. And then, you know, fast forward, I get into coaching situations, and I had already trained on assessing talents and players, where a lot of coaches never had that training. So it was really interesting. They were like, wait, how do you know all that stuff? I'm like, oh, that was like 10 years ago. That was slow, right? Like,
that actually brings up a really good point that you said about wanting to get your name out there, get your face out there, you know, be in the coaches' faces. We're in a really difficult time right now, 2020, COVID. I mean, high schoolers, I know there's different NCAA rules on recruiting and all of that, but high school seniors are kind of screwed right now. College seniors, I know ASU's only played 2 games. Hopefully they play on Saturday. So college seniors are also in a really difficult place. So what advice would you give those players that are kind of thinking, oh, shoot, now do I retire? Like, do I have to get another job because people aren't watching me? You know, what would you tell those guys?
Well, first of all, you know, the only kind of good thing about this is that so much of scouting and player assessment is digital, right? Like at one point it would have been like, if you didn't go to one of the big camps and get seen, you wouldn't get seen, right? So there were real barriers to entry, or, you know, you had to have these traveling road scouts that may pick up on a guy or may not, or they'd be at your game, but, you know, they were really like a trenches person who, you know, I'm not looking at the quarterbacks. Forget those guys. You don't need that. Like if they don't score, they can't win. Everybody knows I say that, right? So it had to be there was, you know, a lot of getting missed because of access and opportunity. Now, everything with scouting is really digital. Whether it's your huddle highlights, whether it's, you know, I guest coached at Howard, believe it or not, at one point after Ron Prince took over. Wow. Yeah, after this team, the Atlanta Legends folded, and the Alliance League, you know, was, as I say, the rapid rise, an epic demise.
Oh, that's a really good way to put that league.
Yeah, like, I mean, it was so good, so cool, and then it was like, oh, we all got fired on Twitter. Amazing. And we literally all got fired on Twitter. And my players asked me, Coach, did you know? And I'm like, look, all I have to say is one thing. Do you think I would have already broken down our next opponent if I knew? And they were like, nah, Coach. And I was like, I would have told you to hold off on that game film if I knew. You guys know I can't lie. I'd be like, just watch the last game and we'll get to that tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, Coach, you don't lie. I'm like, no, I don't. Right? Like, you can look in my eyes and know I'm telling you the truth. You may not always like the truth, but you know that I'm telling you the truth. Mm-hmm. So when it went down, I get a call from my buddy Ron Prince, who used to coach for the Lions. And I hadn't talked to him in a little while, like, because everything was crazy with the Legends. And he's like, Coach, I know you don't know this, but I'm running Howard now. And so it's a new job. And I was like, oh, that's great. Congratulations. And he's like, yeah. So what's your plan? And I was like, I don't know. Like, Coach, we just like, we didn't expect this. I don't have a plan yet. It happened like 5 minutes ago. Literally, it was like, hey, yeah. And I was like, he goes, okay, well, I know you don't have a job. And I was like, bro, thanks, sensitive Band-Aid, rip it off and like expose my whole heart, right? Like, I know you don't have a job. So why don't you get in your car and drive to Howard and come coach here for like a week or so and just get a feel for college. He's like, couple of things. Number one, you working with me means I can now give you a reference because I've worked with you. I see the players have responded. I know how you are with college guys. You know, will they listen? Will they be knuckleheads? Whatever. And he's like, also, you'll get a feel for what it's like to coach college ball. And I was like, okay, what else am I going to do? Sounds cool, right? But being there with those coaches, the biggest difference that you realize is that they are hunting players. They are looking. They are not going to not want you to send them tape. Now, you may not be their player or what they're looking for or what it is, but they are on Twitter recruiting. They are on huddle recruiting. They're on IG recruiting. Like, if you can get a look at a player, they're doing it. So you as players have to become your own agent. Okay. Some people might help you. Your coaches will have a few connects, but there are doors you can knock on all over this country, and people are looking, and guess what? That's what they're doing, is all that tape. So you need to match up. You need to look at what schools have, especially like openings in your roster depth. That's a big thing, right? If you know that, you know, you're a D lineman, right? And you know they have like 12 dudes on the D line. That's not the school for you, right? Go to a school where they're looking for D linemen, or they have a lot of top heavy, right? Meaning they're getting a lot of the good guys are leaving, and they're going to have room for you to come in, because that's going to be a sore spot for them, right? You all want to be in a place where you are absolutely, without a doubt, a hot commodity to them. It's not about you, it's about them. How can you make that coach look like he is like a genie and just came up with a D lineman out of a bottle that nobody else saw, right? Like, you can make them look really good, and that's what they want. Now, your tape is a hook, right? It's a hook, but you've got to make sure that it pulls through. Okay, because they're not gonna give you an offer based on your highlight reel. Everybody better be able to look good one day of their life, coaches will want to, once you get their attention, follow through with full tape. Okay. Because I know for me, I want to see what you're doing when you're not getting the ball. Okay. I remember the first scouting report I wrote was on a running back that everybody was mad that he was being overlooked. Oh, this guy broke all these records. Da, 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 da. And I was like, man, I'm mad too. It's local. I'm looking into it. And I'm watching. And, I'm watching like a defender. Right. And I'm watching. And then I realized that kid's selfish or lazy or something. Because when he was getting the ball, he ready. And he was doing the thing too. Like, you're like, oh, cuts for days, breaking ankles, breaking hearts. Like, yeah. But when he's not getting the ball, I could read it. Right? Like, you're not getting the ball, you're not involved. Okay, you just made your offense one-dimensional, son. Like, play action, big deal. Right? Like, it only works if I believe that the running back's getting the ball. Like, you come off the ball like skippity-doo-dah, like, you're done, son. And I remember rating him as like a, like 7th round free agent at best. And that's exactly where he went. And so we have to look at players on both what they're going to do when they get the ball and what they're doing off, because that tells us your hustle. That tells us your want to. That tells us, okay, I can put this guy, he's never going to quit on his team. So that means he's going to get better when I push him. They also don't be worried if you don't come out of a big time program. Adrian Clem taught me about really scouting. That's my boy. He calls me Buffy because I'm buff, he said. And I was Buffy the quarterback slayer to him because, I killed quarterbacks, right? So he used to come and watch me play. So if y'all don't know Clem, y'all need to get your weight up. But he used to play for the Patriots in their first run, right? And then after he finished with them, he went into scouting. And he did his GA-ship at SMU, which is where we met, which was in the height of my playing career. And when he was there, we used to watch tape together all the time. And he'd be like, Buffy, come look at this guy. Tell me what you think. Buffy, you like this guy or this guy? I'd be like, yeah, this one's a big kid, but his feet bad, Clem. Like, I want this guy. His feet are good. Like, yeah, he's a little smaller, but, get him in a weight program, he'll be fine. And he's like, I can do it, Buffy. That's why I love you. And so he made his bones on finding kids that other people were overlooking because they were only looking at the 5-star programs and everybody was competing for the same kids. And he said, if I've got an old lineman was his specialty, that's what Clem played. If I find a guy with great feet and I can put him in a weight program, he's going to eventually overtake that other guy, right? He ended up going from SMU, UCLA, and now he's an O-line coach with the Steelers. So realize people are looking. They may not, you will need to get them to look though, right? So be hungry about it. If it's what you want, reach out, bite an ankle, tell a story, tug on a sleeve, whatever it is, but get there. Because just because they haven't seen you doesn't mean they don't want to or they won't look, but make sure that they feel how much you love ball too. Because what I don't want is a spoiled, entitled, I know more than you anyway. I will do that testing in camps. I did it at one of my girls' camps. And then we were in Miami. We were at Liberty City. Like, these girls are cold, right? Like, I'm from Florida. We have a different kind of swag down there. And these, it's true, right? We have a different kind of swag. I was in Liberty City and the girls all played, varsity flag football, which is different than a lot of places. And I went up to the group and I said, all right, which one of you is the coldest? I drop nothing when the game is on the line. I'm the one you're throwing the ball to in the end zone. Every one of them raised their hand. First of all, you are not all that person. You don't even all play receiver.
You're a center. Relax.
Right?
Relax.
Right? I love your attitude, but I hate the fact that you just lied to me, right? And I looked at him and I was like, all right, so you all know everything. You don't need me. And I started to walk away. And they were like, but we want to learn from you. And I said, I just asked you which one of you knew everything about receiving, and you all said you did. So if I have nothing to give you, then I'm wasting my time. Right? And then I was like, okay, so you're all cold receivers, throw your diamonds up. Okay, your diamond's broken, you're dropping money. Boom, not having it. Oh, you're too close to your face. You just broke your nose, pretty. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Like 5 different things. And they were like, okay. And I was like, right. So coaches want somebody who has want to and want to get better, right? Like I used to bug my friends, right? When I was playing, I'd be like, teach me something. Teach me more football, right? Because like we weren't always getting that access to coaching, and they took pride in it. They'd be like, yeah, I got this. You see her do that? That's my girl, right? Coaches, like we want to see, like we're looking to see what your ceiling is and how we can project that out, not your baseline and not your floor. We want to see where you're going to be, because that's where your program, especially in college, is going to emerge. Right? Because we have you for 4 years. So we don't just need how you walk in the door. We need to know where you're going to be after we've had you and had a chance to build you up. So be proactive, be positive, tell your story, be annoying, right? And sell yourself.
Yeah, I do have a question. I know CJ kind of wants to talk about you and, I mean, obviously all the success you've had, but a question that I'm not sure if you will feel very passionate one way or the other. But I always love talking this topic with former football players or whoever. So on social media now, high schoolers will do these insane graphics and statements and all of that, being like, I have decommitted from this school, blah, 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 blah. Please respect my decision. I'm now open to offers, and like fans go crazy blowing them up, like play here. What are your thoughts on just social media and how it has totally taken recruiting to another level?
Well, I think recruiting is good, but if I'm a coach and you just said I committed here and I decommitted here, I'm open to offers, I'm like, so I can't count on your word, right? Like, why I'm going to chase you? If I wasn't already talking to you, you might have already turned me off by that point. Right? Because it's not going to put you on a coach's radar, but it can pull you off it. Now, I understand if you committed really early, right? And then maybe you grew. And that's when you see a lot, right? Like you might have taken a safer offer and then you grew and you realized you could project a lot higher. Okay. Those are different scenarios. And it's also when you do in a recruiting process. But if I'm a coach and I'm building something around you, and then you make a big stink about decommitting to me, you know, I get that your fans might go crazy. Cool, you got your Twitter numbers up. But like if I'm somebody who's trying to be a program or like build a program, and depending on where you do it, you've already missed some of the offers, right? I don't love it. And I've seen it from guys too often. Now, it's one thing if you get a recruiting visit and you say, "Ooh, went here," and you're showcasing teams that are looking at you. That's different, because you might get somebody to look at you that you're like, "Oh shit, I missed somebody on the radar," right? Like, "Oh snap," right? Because again, recruiters and coaches are competitive too. Now, we don't miss a lot, especially not the tops, but if you're mid-tier, especially if you went to a more under the radar school, but one school picked up on you, yeah, you can boost yourself through that, right? Because it is going to make other schools, right, say, look at you. Maybe you're like, say, a D2, okay? Let's use that for an example. And you're on a good D2 or D3. You'll get some other coaches that have smaller staffs that will now probably look at you because they're like, you know, like if I'm a D-line coach, right, and I know that my boy is really good at spotting talent, and somebody just said he got brought in there, I'm going to look, right? Because we're all competitive and we all know who knows their stuff. So if like certain people said they were picking up on a D lineman, I'd be like, guy couldn't sack a quarterback. He couldn't sack groceries, much less a quarterback, right? Like I don't care. But certain people, you're like if I was at another school and Clem was picking up on an O lineman and somebody said he got a visit with him, I'd be like, now I'm looking, right? And we'll also talk because you may not have that many spots open, right? And I'll be like, hey, are you guys going to sign this kid? And he'd be like, oh, I don't know, here's where we are in depth. And then I'll be like, all right, so if you're not because if we're friends, I'm not going to try and take his guy necessarily, but we will make sure other good guys get to go places, right? Like I might call somebody and be like, hey, if I had another spot for a D lineman, I'd be picking up on this guy. He needs to go somewhere, right? So you can help yourself in making yourself marketable, but I don't like flaking out on schools, right? And don't do it without having a plan of where you're going. I think that's trash. That would turn me off. I'd be like, unless you were that good. And if you were that good, I was already looking at you. So
honestly though, that's the wave right now though. I coached in high school until a couple of years ago, and I love my athletes to death, and I know a few of them are going to listen to this, but they're from a little school in New Hampshire, and yeah, okay, fine, we went undefeated, and yeah, okay, fine, we were blowing out teams by 60 points, but there was a lot of just this flexing on each other, which I don't think that helps anybody, right?
Look, I don't mind flexing on each other, but I'm saying decommitting to a school.
I think that's just trying to flex on the people that are around you though. Cause the thing is if you're just trying to decommit from a school, you would think that would be more of oh, I'm just going to go and talk to them and decommit, instead of making this big to-do of hey friends, I'm so good, I can leave this school and potentially go to another one. And I saw my athletes do that a couple times, and I was like, dude, I can't. I can't.
Right, I can't with you. Like I said, that so much is not strategic. You think it is, right? But I don't want to look at who I'm going to bring into a program and build into them and think that they're going to one and done me and go into the pool either. Right now with the transfer portal, it's a whole different ball game. And so if you've already been decommitting and this, that, and the other, then what's going to make me think that you're not going to do that here? Right? I'm just going to go in the portal and I'm out. I think it's important because I want to be able to push people, invest in them, and make them better. So what if I do that and I get this guy up to the point where he is balling, and then all of a sudden he's just like, yeah, coach, thanks for that, I'm gonna go. Right? There is going to become a lot more of that. And, I have long thought that the fact that you were with a school for 4 years can be a real advantage, especially if the program's good. Now, obviously some programs are not, and you need to get out, right? Because it is just trash and you don't realize it till you get there. Or, you agree to do something outside yourself. And then you realize it's not yours. Like a kid I coached at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, right? We're in Canton. We're doing some of the high school stuff. Really liked him as a linebacker. He reached out to me, and I appreciate that too, because not a lot of guys, especially in high school, would have the commitment to a female coach, right? They might be like, oh, whatever, this, or to follow up, right? And I still keep in touch with him because you were a standout to me. You did everything I ever asked, right? You'll go somewhere. And he reached out to tell me he was going to another school, and I won't put him on blast, to play fullback. And it's a big time program. It was a big time school. And I was like, and this was before Juszczyk brought the fullback back, right? I see some people bring sexy back. Juszczyk brought the fullback back for me, right? We kind of get back to, hard nose, fullback football. I like this. I like some double tight. I like the fullback. I like the ground and pound. Okay, you made a fullback a position again. You made that a position that's desirable again. But this was before that. And I'm going, the fullback in college? Right. Maybe yes, maybe no. But to switch positions to do that, it's not something I would have advised. But you also don't want to kill his dream, and I'm not coaching him, so I'm like, hey, I'll support you wherever. And he ended up, he's like, man, coach, they don't even really use me. Like, I feel like I'm wasting my talent. I kind of want to go back to linebacker. And he entered the portal. I get that, right? Like, that was a direction. And he did. I said, here's the only thing I'll say. Talk to your coaches first and give them the opportunity to move you to the other side of the ball, right? Like, just say, hey, I tried this, I did it, but I really felt better at linebacker, and I think there's more future for me, right? Because some programs are just going to use you up, and they don't care that you go anywhere else, and that's something that you need to know as an athlete, right? And I think in this position, that's kind of what it was, right? But everybody goes through life and they learn different. So for him, when he made that decision, and he did, he was like, yeah, that's a good idea, coach. I'll talk to him. And he did talk to him. They weren't really open to moving him to the other side of the ball. And then he left. I get that, right? Like, and any coach is going to say, I get that. I mean, I'm a linebacker. I'd be like, I don't want to play fullback either. I get you. You know, I like defense too. But I think too often we just make it so easy to flip-flop that it's hard to really do those things. And for me as a coach, like, your commitment is the biggest thing, right? How much time am I going to have to build into you? What athlete can you become? And if I feel like you're not committed, then it's like, am I going to take you if all other things are equal? And let's just put it that way, right? Talent is talent. You know, you're a receiver, you got cold hands. He's a receiver, he's got cold hands, right? You know, the toe drag swag, you got all that, right? I even like your highlight reel. I hate your fashion, but I love your swag, right? Like, let's just say all of these things. And one of you, commitment-wise, decommitted, did all this stuff, and the other one is just like, you know, I don't care if you're charging your buddies up. I don't care if you're showcasing visits, all of that. But one is like, oh, I decommitted and I did this, that, and the other. I'm going to go with the guy who appears to be more consistent, because I feel like he's going to be consistent in my program and how I coach him.
Right. No, that's very fair. And I guess in the same vein of recruiting, I got super lucky to coach a young lady from the time she was a freshman until she was a senior. Shout out Maddie Lucatoni, killing it out at Assumption, playing hockey. And I always think back to if I could have done, like, how I could have coached her in a better way to put her in front of more programs to potentially give her the opportunity, you know, like we're seeing in these last, you know, in this college football season. So if you could give, you know, coaches advice to potentially get their female players recognized more, you know, spoken to more by coaches, what advice would you give?
What is it that you want them to get more of?
Because I felt like, because Maddie was our top scorer for our entire school, right? And she was an absolute savage kicker, but like nobody gave her any mind, right? Because she was a small female from a small school kicking, and I felt like that I could have done something as a coach to be like, yo, listen to me right now. That is one of the coldest kickers. Like, you're not going to find much better. And so I don't know if there was
exactly what I would do.
Yeah,
I would put her stuff on tape, and I would do outreach to programs. Yeah. I would also look at, you know, programs that traditionally maybe don't get as many, you know, or have a smaller staff, so they can't do as much outreach. Yeah. Or some of the, you know, what is it, like is it the WAC? Like, they can't do outbound recruiting, right? But once you contact them, then they can talk to you. Yeah, it was, and I don't know if this is still the rule, but it used to be that the WAC, like, they couldn't, that Washington, California, all that, they couldn't go and look for you outside of state. That was the way they were trying to keep scholarship money in-house, right? Like, on the West Coast. But if you reached out to them and said, hey, look at me, then they had permission to look. And those schools, it used to be that those schools traditionally had scholarship money even that wasn't utilized because a lot of people didn't know it. So I think a lot of that becomes your almost willingness to stand on the table for somebody, because it is going to take somebody who thinks outside of the box, who would be willing to do it. And then also, you know, having some buzz around it doesn't hurt, because, I mean, let's look at it. You have an 0-for team right now that people are talking about because of a kicker. Okay? So are there not some schools who might consider that? And then the fact that she is cold and she can do the job, right? This isn't just like, you know, somebody showing up and they're like, right? In this social media world where coaches are online looking for talent and schools are looking for storylines, which equate to dollars. I mean, I would absolutely make that girl a star, right? I would also make sure that the narrative is clear, that you as her coach have that confidence in her and her teammates have confidence in her, right? Because the pushback you often get is like, you know, oh, well, what if she gets hit? Great, show her getting blasted, getting back up and keep going, right? Like, because it happens, right? Like, I mean, it's football. Right. Like some of those, I mean, look, Sarah Follier is 6'2". Is
she really?
Yeah, she's
tall.
I mean, I know that she's a goalie, but I didn't know that she was that tall.
She's 6'2". Okay. I played men's pro football at 5'2", and I got, you know, I mean, I got blasted, got back up and did it again. Where the guys respected me the most is I never threw my hands up and said, you can't hit me, I'm a girl. Now, first of all, it's indoor, so that's not even feasible because you can't even run out of bounds. But I took the hits, got back up, and kept going. That's going to be your biggest pushback with a girl. And, you know, I said, Coach, you better teach her how to run down the field and protect herself. Yeah. I don't care if she makes the tackle, because most kickers don't, right? And she's probably the safety. Right. But, you know, she needs to contribute if you're going to have her on the field. Right. It can't just be kick and then we're afraid you're going to get blindsided, because that's the pushback.
I can appreciate.
And I've heard that from staffs before. And I'm like, look, I'll give you one, but I won't give you having her run to the sidelines, because now you're setting up that narrative. And for those of us who have played football for a long time, it's not fair. And for kickers that have taken those hits, like Julie Harshberg, Kate Hindi, Beck Longo, like, you've been doing this, for someone to not fully do the job is not fair. So, I mean, I've told him, I was like, I'll fly out there and teach her how to tackle myself. I will come on GP because she deserves that. Right? But run down the field, learn how to like dip and rip your shoulder. Let one of those boys try and cheap shot her and bounce off. I guarantee she hits the ground on that, gets back up, and she will have 20 times the respect that she has right now for Pooch kicking the ball.
So you want to hear the best story that has to do with like people being scared to hit a girl. So Maddie Lucatoni, I come in week 3, right? I didn't know what to expect with this team, doing offensive, defensive line, and I see her run on the field, and I go, who is that? And they go, oh, that's Maddie Lucatoni. And I go, oh, we have a girl on the team. I played high school football with a girl, so I was like, oh, that's dope, right? And so about halfway through her freshman season, she comes up to us, she goes, Coach, I want to hit. And I and the other coach, we go, you want to hit? And she goes, yeah. And so we sit there, we look at each other, and we were literally in the middle of this hitting drill, and we just go, cool, let's do it, right? And so we look at her and we go, Maddie, choose your man. Choose your man, right? And she walks up and down this line, and there's this kid who I will not name, even though usually when I tell the story I do. She points.
Right. You're going to have to walk with me because my battery's going to go dead. So we're on the move. Y'all on the move. Look, you can see my artwork. See, I'm a little bit of an artist. That's low key.
That's yours?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, hold on. What's that made out of?
So it's particle board, and then there's actual branches. The flowers are handmade on it. So that's more of a collection. But if you see the green one, that one's actually painted. And I do all the furniture too.
So have you ever heard of Brandon McGee? by any chance? He was a football player.
And a baseball player.
He's the one who does the free art, right? Isn't that him? No,
Yeah.
no, that's Byron Batch. Sorry, that's someone else.
Well, anyways, Brandon McGee he's one of both CJ and I's friends, but he played baseball and football at ASU, played professionally both those sports, but got hurt. Now he's doing a Netflix movie about his mom and all of that. But I bring him up because he started painting because of his anxiety just post-sports. And his whole background is like paintings of cartoons. And so we'll have to connect you two because he lives for it. And he's like the best guy in the world. So I feel like we need to put you in contact. So.
Absolutely. I love multidimensional people. My mom was an artist.
Okay.
My sister went to Rhode Island School of Design. And I was just taught that you could create beauty anywhere. And so especially when I was playing football, it wasn't necessarily anxiety, but it was like a good way to get up and get moving and just switch my mind to something else. And all the stuff that I do is very layered painting. So you can only it takes patience in a way, which is good because each color, the way you get that drastic separation is each color has to, it has to dry. So you can only do it for so long. If you try and rush it, it's going to look like trash. So I would, take 20 minutes, go do that, get up, switch up what I was doing, move around a little bit. It was outside when I was in Dallas, and then come back in and kind of refresh. So switch my mind, but I would love to. So, and it's great. Like for anybody who's watching, as serious as you are in athletics and sports, you need change ups in your life. I watch a lot of tape. You can only watch tape so much. And whether it's art or music or something, like being able to stretch that creativity in yourself can really, really help. So I want to hear the story. Who'd she hit?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay. So she chooses the guy and she lines up, and everyone in the entire program, including the varsity team that was down at the end, stopped, right? And it was dead silent, looked like a Wild West movie, two people lining up and someone was going to die guaranteed. Yes. And so literally I sit there and in my mind, I go, please God, let this go the way that I want it to. And I go, set, hit. And then you see this young lady take off, and then you see a dead body on the other side of where she was. And I sit there and I look, and it wasn't her by any means. And it was this other kid who was just flat on his back. And I remember sitting there and just walking over to him being like, hey man, are you doing good? And he goes, no. And I go, you want to get up? He goes, no. And I just go, everyone go get water. Maddie, good job. And they get about 8 feet away. And then the next thing you know, it's this freshman eruption of just, cheers and laughter and all these things.
For
and
sure.
I'll tell you that she's a savage. I wish that I had gotten her to play football for 1 year in college, but she's a superb ice hockey player. So she's out playing ice hockey. So,
and I mean, ice hockey is such a great sport as well. But, I tell people, I'm like, so much of it is the barriers that we have in our minds. Yeah. I have guys still that I played with that are some of my best friends, right? And, so Clinton Solomon, who played for the Chicago Bears, he was on the Texas Revolution when I played with them.
Okay.
And, he's so funny. I love Solo. He is that prototypical big smile, flashy swag, wide receiver. Right. That you smile and it looks like a Colgate commercial. Right. And yeah, I mean, it just does. And I love Solo. So I meet him and he comes over. There was an open tryout. They just announced that I was going to play on this team. So it was a big deal. I don't know any of these guys. And, you see some of them looking from afar, I don't know, they're making the face, they're talking. And I was like, about to go punch you in your face, right? We want to end this. I'm going to end it right now. I don't need pads. I played rugby first. You will be on the ground with all these cameras around. But woosah. right? Like, you know, what is it? Like this, the woo-saw, right? Like, and Solo comes over and he's like, I gotta introduce myself. You know, Clint Solomon played for the Chicago Bears, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I just want you to know that you are the best thing that's happened to indoor football since I've been here. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, you see all these cameras? They've never been here. That's because of you. And he said, I don't know what any of these other guys are gonna do, but I want you to know I've got your back. No matter what, I've got your back. And I was like, well, that's nice. And he was like, no, that's just smart. Just short. I'm gonna be in all the pictures. You know? And I was like, I love this dude already, right? Like he was too. And he would, we have so many pictures where he's like right next to me, right? But he said, nah, he's like, seriously though, it's gonna be tough. You know, there's gonna be a lot of people who don't want to see you make it. And he said, but no matter what, here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I need you to be ice cold. No matter what happens, don't you let one of those dudes get to you. Something bothers you, you come and tell me and let me handle it because you're a part of that team. You're a part of this team. And if you handle it and pop off, then the other guys will kind of be like, oh, she's got this, right? And he's like, then you'll have fight after fight after fight, and you'll be fighting us. And he's like, I need you to be a part of our locker room. So I need you to let me be your champion. And I was kind of like, I don't know you like that, right? Like I used to be that person who would set the tone in women's football, and like now I need a champion. I'm gonna give you a strong maybe, right? Like I just don't know yet, right? Like, cause you could just be blowing smoke, and you know, then I go tell you and be like, she fell for it, right? Who knows? And I'm used to handling everything myself, right? So I just kind of was like, hey, it's great to meet you. That was cool, but you know, I'm kind of like still keeping one eye on you. You don't get both eyes. You get one, you know, a little to the side. And so we're in practice one day, and I will never forget this moment. It was one of the most like memorable moments of like my life because of how it stood out. Now, me running back, which again, we know that's not what I naturally play. So it is already a setup to get me killed. Okay. We are doing inside run. Okay. As a 5'2", 130-pound running back, that's tough, right? You're picking up the blitzing linebacker. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough day. And you know, there's no running outside the box. So every play you're getting hurt. Meanwhile, the receivers in secondary getting to play 7-on-7, right? Like y'all just like let's go catch some passes on air.
Doing whatever they do.
Yeah, like I mean, and you know, I'm like faces probably in the mud, like it's dirty, it's Texas, it's cold, and I'm just like, you know, I'd be like, oh, okay, I got this time, and then I'd lean, I'd be swimming like with my face in the mud, like on the ground, I'd be like, can do better, right? Like get up, like, oh, I'm having a day. And Solo kind of trots by, and he's like, "Little mama, don't worry about it. I got this." I don't even know what you're talking about, but cool, right? Like, I don't got this right here, but whatever you got, that's great. Like, you guys go be pretty, right? And so he runs over to the head coach, and he said, "Coach, I need some one-on-ones right now." And coach just kind of looks at him like, you know, Coach Dub is that Alabama football coach. You know, people would say Coach Dub doesn't smile because he didn't want to be found. Right? He didn't want to be found. And I mean, he had a snarl that would knock you off your post. Coach Dub just kind of looked at him and he's like, all right, do what you got to do, Solo. Solo stops practice, calls this dude out, and says, you want to talk smack to a girl? You are not good enough. You and me, one-on-one, right now, I'm going to get you cut today. Apparently, the guy was over there running his mouth when they were doing 7-on-7. I mean, angry and loud, right? Like, for no reason. I'm not even talking to you. There's no reason a girl should be out here. It's insulting, da-da-da-da-da, blah, 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 chirp, chirp, chirp. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he said, I hope she runs over here. I'm going to end her. That was all Solo needed to hear. He was like, oh, really? Oh, you're going to end somebody? No, I'm going to end you right now. And I'm going to set the standard, right? And He goes, oh, so, he's like, yeah, come on, you and me. So the corner lines up on Solo off man, right? And Solo's like, oh, no, 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 no. You're a big man? You want to talk smack to a girl? You're going to press me, right? And then, so he comes up, lines up on him. Solo looks at the quarterback. He's like, yo, quarterback, I'm about to run a fade on this dude and score, right? Oh, boy, sure did. He called the route, broke off. I will never forget it. One hand grab, Solo pulls it down, puts it in his face, and said, you still want to talk smack to a girl? Let's go again. And I watched, first of all, that dude got cut, right? They made an example of him, like, you're going to do that, you're not a good teammate, right? We don't hurt our teammates. There's a code. You know this as well as I do. If we wanted to take anybody out on any play in football, you pretty much do it, right? You want to win the play. You don't want to end somebody, right? Except for a few. There's a few, but they usually get it back as good as they give it because everybody knows who those people are. And like, look, let us handle it between the snaps, as I always say, between the snaps. And you see it pop over, right? That's what people don't see, right? Like, anything that you see happened way before that. Right. And you've now hurt somebody or pushed something and it's now out that we have to handle it. Mm-hmm. Right. But Solo boy, like as soon as that happened and he stepped up like that, being the captain of our team and our number one receiver, that was it. Like it went from, me trying out as kind of an outsider to us being a team. And it became a point of pride for those guys. Like when we played other teams and stuff, and I talked to Solo the other day and it was funny. He's like, man, Jen, and I thanked him was what it was. I was like, man, Solo, I think about that all the time. Like, thank you so much for having my back. Like you didn't have to do that. And he goes, yeah, I did. He said, but don't thank me. He said, you changed every single man on that team. You made me better. You made me not only a better football player because of the heart and the, he's like, and frankly, the balls that you had to come out and play with us. Mm-hmm. He's like, you made me want more. You made me think different. Like for you to do that at 5'2", shoot, if I couldn't stand up for you, I'm not a man. And he said, I still have people to this day who are like, man, are you, that team you played for, isn't that the team that had a girl? And he said, no, I have to correct him. It's not a girl, it's the girl. Like that was special. And, it's just one of those things, like those things can change the way we see other people beyond the football field. Like we can be so much better, but too many times people just count somebody out, right? Like that's why I said that, literally told a coach at Vanderbilt, I was like, I will fly there and teach her myself. She deserves that. We all, like every woman who has played football deserves that because we don't deserve them saying, oh yeah, she could kick, but you gotta not have her on the field, right? Like teach her how to protect herself and just dip and rip through one person trying to take them out and watch that dude miss a tackle and see what happens.
She'd be fine because the thing is she can already move well enough because of her playing. She has great feet.
You're right. But do it. Don't count her out. And I'm like, shoot, 6'2". They're worried about a cheap shot. I'm worried about that dude breaking his ego off.
Little more. I'm a 5'11". Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, this is going to be a fun one. We're going to be at that tomorrow.
Right, and how many kickers are like way smaller than 6'2"? Right? Like,
exactly.
Right, like Koo, who's over Youngway Koo, who's over on the Falcons. That's my dude. That was my kicker with the Legends, and we all knew how good he was. I was mad at our coaches; they never let him boot it for 60 because he could do it consistently. Yeah. Right, but they were always scared. I mean, offense. They didn't ask me for where we should kick from. They should have, but he's tiny. And nobody's worried about Koo not being able to handle himself. He can. Probably miss him. Just get in the pocket of a D lineman. You'll be fine. They'll never see you.
Take care of you. Don't worry about it.
Right.
So back to, I guess, the negativity part. How did you deal with that? Like, how did you deal with that through, obviously probably until now, how's like the mental health side? What do you do to kind of keep yourself confident and kind of, able to go?
I laugh in their faces, literally. Like,
love that.
Mm-hmm. Humor is literally one of the best tools that I have found in tough situations, right? Both for guys that are even like, we're in weird situations. It's weird. I used to have a female there for coach. So you say stuff. Like, I'm not going to get mad. If I didn't think you intended to say something that just maybe came out wrong, I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to let you know about it. Right. Like I say all the time, one of my favorite phrases is, you do realize you said that out loud, right? Because we all have those moments where we say something and we immediately wish we could retract and get those words back. It was like there was a great thought somewhere up here in your brain, but by the time the words came out of your mouth, something went horribly wrong. So I will laugh at that. I'm like, I know there was a thought back there somewhere, but something went wrong by the time it got to me. And they would always laugh and they'd be like, oh my gosh, coach, that's not what I meant. I'm like, I know. I'm just telling you that, in the rest of the world, they may not be as understanding as I am.
Right.
So you might not want to ever use that combination of words ever again. And then they realize that for me, like, we're going to figure it out. I'm not going to freak out unless you were trying to be a jerk. And then I'll tell you were a jerk. Right. But humor has also been the tool that I used to deal with the criticism. And even then having to I think the hardest one for me at first was like when I'm playing at Revolution, I came from relatively being anonymous, right? Like nobody knew women playing football, right? Like, we used to try and be like, hey, you want my autograph? They'd be like, what? For what? Right? Like, who are you? We don't, like, what? I'm sorry, you have a football. Like, what? You a water girl? Like, they didn't know. We're the best women in the world. Nobody knew we existed. So, once I went to the Revolution, all of a sudden, I was the number one story in the country, though nothing like what those stories pick up now are. And, and I tried to just kind of ignore it at first, but that's not also really possible, right? Because other people hear it and see it and say it. And I remember I was training, I worked as a personal trainer, and one of my clients, she knew I was trying not to look at the comments for articles and all that stuff. And she sends me a message on my phone and she's like, I just couldn't resist. Well, now I have to look, right? And it turns out that this dude had made a comment like, she's going to get hit and or get pregnant and die. Or no, die and or get pregnant, right? And I was like, I remember I was at my house and I just start laughing uncontrollably, right? Like that was so funny to me. And her comment on it was, and here's hoping you're sterile, right? And she was just like, and I was like, oh, she's a cold one, right? So then when I got asked on I think it was one of my first interviews that was like radio and I was doing the car wash, I knew that they were all going to want to get into the controversy. So I decided the best way to handle y'all media people was to just take your questions out of your mouth and answer them the way I wanted to. So I was like, hey, so I got a great story for y'all. I know you've heard the controversy. So there was this one guy who commented. It was amazing. He said that I was going to get hit and die and or get pregnant. And I just have to tell you right now that I was one of the best linebackers in the world for a very long time. And I hit people really hard, but I did not know it was possible to hit someone so hard that I could cause immaculate conception and death. I didn't know it, but apparently that's what's going to happen. And, of course, everybody who's like trying to interview is like, okay, we can't top that. Right? Like, I don't care what you read that was like, oh, something's going to happen. You can't top immaculate conception and death.
Oh.
I love that. And I think the best thing about the show Storytime that CJ and I do is I've worked in media relations. I've also worked on the media side. And I always hate, especially that I work for a team now, I hate when media goes for the controversy. I always try to avoid that with this show. And so I think it's so great that you just went in and kind of threw everyone off, because I'm sure in their heads they're like, all right, well, we have no like juicy story now. But one, obviously.
But they did laugh. I mean, that was one of the things. And I had, several guys who were like ex-NFL guys, and they're like, oh, she'll be fine. Right? Like they were immediately like, oh yeah, she'll be just fine. Like they laughed. They'd be like, I wish you would have said that to me. Right? Like, and it was those moments both on the field, in the meeting room, and in the media, right? I handled it the same way, right? With the guys, it was the same thing, right? On the field, like early, before they knew, right? I always say the guys needed to know two things. One, that I belonged. I was there for the football. I was not going to like throw up my hands and be like, you can't hit me, I'm a girl. No, that's the job description, right? So like, if I got hit, even got blasted, got back up and did it again, that was fine. The only thing that wasn't fine was saying like, you can't hit me, I'm a girl, right? That was the only thing that to me would be a non-starter. Because if somebody tried to do that on my team, I would have beat your brakes off just because, right? Like, don't come in here with that thinking you're entitled, right? And the second one was that we could get along. And that moment was one of my favorites also. We were going from one drill to the other one day, and literally the coach was just like, hey, running backs, do you have your balls? So of course, one of the linebackers like, yeah, coach, all but Jen. I walked over to him and I patted him on the chest. And I said, that's okay, baby. When I need some balls, I'll just take yours out of your wife's purse.
Hey, that's the response we're looking for.
Right? Game over. They were like, yeah. They're like, oh, got him. Hey, who's got the purse with his balls in it? Like that was it. And then it was fine because they were like, oh, like she can give it back to us. We're fine. Right? Like, I'm not going to get offended. I'll get right in the mix. And I would tell people too, I'd be like, but if you want to go there with me, please remember that I have a PhD. I mess with minds for a living and I will own you. Right? Like, it's not going to go easy on you. If we're going in, it's going to go hard. And, you might have to get your balls out of your wife's purse or mine.
Happens to, and to that point, so you have what, a PhD in sports psychology and a master's in sports psychology, both of them?
Well, so they'll only give a master's in sports psychology. At least when I did it, there was no quote unquote PhD. So it's a PhD in psychology, but the emphasis in that still was obviously sports psychology.
There it is. And you can use that to break the minds of any athlete in the world, huh?
Well, you break past a lot of those preconceived notions is what it is, right? And build bridges in the process. I did an interview just the other day, and it was interesting because, it was a former NFL guy, and he said, it's like, Jen, I'm really curious because you've coached both men and women, right? Like, what's the biggest difference that you've noticed? And I said, well, let me give you a caveat, like on women. When I say this, it may also have to do with their point of entry into football, right? I wouldn't say this was a blanket statement across all women, but what I have found in women in football is because they traditionally came to the game later, they want to know the why, right? Because they're still trying to put together all the pieces sometimes. Like, why am I doing this relative to somewhere else? So they want to know the reasons. And, of course, he started laughing. He was like, well, that sounds like every woman I've ever known, right? And I'm like, we do generally want the story. That's how our brains work. But also in football, because they're still trying to put things together, like you got to give them a little bit more context. And I had coaches who thought I was difficult because I'd ask them why. And I'm like, I'm not trying to fight with you. I really want the big picture, right? Like, and if I'm doing this, but this happens here, like, what am I supposed to do? So I want the contingency. And I said, with guys, the biggest difference maker that I found with them, or what my sweet spot was, is like, it had to be founded in trust and love. They trusted that I always had their best interest at heart, and they knew I cared about them as more than just like what they could do for the X's and O's. And I said, you know, a lot of the times it was simply like knowing a guy well enough to know what he was capable of. Like if you had a routine play that you did 99 times out of 100, and then you make a mistake that's out of character, right? Instead of me saying, oh, like, why would you do that? Or that was a stupid play, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, hey, what's going on? You all right? And he just looked at me and he goes, coaches don't do that. And I was like, well, but if I know that that's your play, you're not making it because you're not capable or because you don't know it. You're probably missed it because your mind is somewhere else, like especially for the really top level guys. And I said, just the fact that I would ask them and say, like, are you doing all right? Like they'd be like, coach, how'd you know? Right? I'd be like, hey, if your mind is somewhere else, then it's not here. And I need you to be here to, you know, for you to execute or to get you better. So let's fix what's going on here, or let's address it. And then we'll be able to get back to ball. And, you know, it's so interesting to me because I've never had an athlete who didn't appreciate that. Now they may not want to talk to about it or couldn't, or, you know, but the fact that you noticed and you cared enough to like put the human element into it, as opposed to you're only as good as your last play, that to me creates that foundation for the trust and love that then, you know, if you'll let me into your life and something that's going on in your house, it's really not hard to say, hey, I need you to get to heel depth, squeeze the line as they flow, and, you know, keep outside contain before you break on the quarterback. Like that stuff becomes really like, yeah, I got you, coach, because they know there's so much more behind it. So the fact that that I've always had guys who were really responsive on technique came from the way that things were communicated, right? And our relationship, which I don't think we talk about enough in coaching.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. He may hate me calling him out. I kind of hope he's not listening to this, but the Cardinals connection, he also played for ASU, but Zane Gonzalez. He has had a rough season when he was with the Cleveland Browns. Also another rough season. Social media went crazy. I actually tweeted out after the last Cardinals game, people were like, I will pay somebody to take out Zane Gonzalez. I will kill Zane Gonzalez next time I see him, all for missing a field goal. So how important, if you were his coach, how would you handle knowing that I'm sure in some way, shape, or form, he's going to hear what people are saying on social media. They're human beings. They aren't robots. How would you bring in just that female, you know, the love and support and all of that as his coach? You know, what would you tell him just so he can focus on, he's still one of the best. He's in the NFL. But what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, Steve Keim knows me and he should just call me because, you know, I was there and they all know it. Right? Like Marcus Golden's still back in the room and he's one of my dudes. Chandler Jones, like those guys know me. But so Steve Keim is slipping. I don't know Cliff Kingsbury, so I can't talk to him. We've never, you know, but I do know Steve. So, you know, the first thing is this. People think that social media is hard on athletes. We're way harder on ourselves than anybody else could ever be. Right? The second it's like as a coach, you don't even have to yell at somebody. You just kind of look at them and they're like, coach, I know. Right? Like we take it into our souls. I still have a play from 2004 that could wake me out of a dead sleep. Right? Like, you know, and we won the game. Like, that's the funniest thing. We won the game. I still remember it though, right? Like Stacey Agee up the sidelines. I was supposed to have safety help, but it doesn't matter, right? Like, I jammed the crap out of that girl on the line and she still broke off and came up off the sidelines, right? Like, we know the mistakes that we make.
Right.
You're not telling us anything we don't know.
Right.
Okay. So the social media is hard in and of itself and can create different dynamics that affect your life beyond the sport. But we're very cognizant of what we need to do right and wrong. Now, kicking holds a special place in my heart. This was one of the biggest one of the early kind of putting psychology and football together papers that I did on a big level. And it was the argument that being a kicker is the most psychologically challenging position in all of sports, because you have to have the mentality and focus of a golfer in the environment of a football player. Like, imagine how good these golfers would do if they had 11 people trying to take their head off at any one time. Okay. I don't think you would make those things. Right. And so, you know, that mentality to be, yeah, exactly. You'd be like, and run. Right. Like, you'd be like throwing the golf cart at people, or you'd be like, can somebody get the golf cart and save me? Right. Like, you'd be throwing the clubs.
Throw the 5 at that guy. I need to use my 7 to get that down, and then we need to all run.
Right. I mean, you know, so it's a hard mental position anyway. Plus, every time you're on the field, all eyes are on you, right? Like, you know, field goal, you're on for points. You're not just coming on for a play that someone else could make or not make. Now, yes, other things can get messed up, but you know, that kick sails, they're looking at you. They're not, oh, the laces out, blah, blah, blah. That's not the conversation, right? Like, one announcer might pull out something like that, but that's not the conversation. It is you, it is your hook, and everybody's going to say, oh, it's your one job, right? You do one job. So we all know it. It is hard. Now, for any athlete, the secret to the zone, or whatever you want to call it, is focusing on the elements that are in your control in the present moment. A lot of people get stuck in who's watching, what's happening, you know, the weather, the ref. If I do this, then we'll do this, right? They go past, oh gosh, because of this. They go future, they go sidelines, they go media. The secret to success is being able to focus on, in any one moment, what it takes to do this one job in its simplest form. So what I would tell him is to focus on the elements of success, and you can't tune out that stuff so that it never affects you. But what you can do is remember the fact that your mind, and this is a really powerful thing, your mind can actually only hold one thought at a time. Obviously it jumps from point to point, but what you do to minimize those exterior pain points is to minimize the amount of time that you stay there. And this is why music becomes so powerful, right? Like, I mean, think about it. You walk into a place, you're in a bad mood, right? You've been in a really bad mood. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to see anybody. You walk into a room and like, there's that song on and you can't help it. You're like, mm-hmm. And then you're like, no, I'm not. I'm in a bad mood. I'm not doing that right now, right? And you like resist it.
Then you're
and
like,
then, right? And then before you know it, you're like, yeah, that's my. And then it finishes and you're kind of like, I was in a bad mood. Because you're really only able to fully live in one thought at a time. So the trick is to teach yourself to train your mind to return to where it needs to be faster. And so sometimes that means having a loud mind, right? Like, and going through and saying the things in your head that you need to focus on, right? And being intentional even about like your practice, right? Like I've coached quarterbacks on this before. I'm like, I want you to say your read progression out loud.
Ooh, that's never fun. They have no idea how to do that. I've done that before. They freeze up like a deer and head. Ooh,
Right. And especially if it's somebody else's rep, because that way you can make it an active rep as opposed to a passive rep. Passive rep, I could be thinking about dinner. I could be thinking about this. I may be watching, but really like it's like watching tape and the tape is watching you, right? As opposed to engaging your mind and making it an active, proactive rep. So what I would tell him is to really be proactive about his mental pattern, right? Like there's like, and that means the conditioning on doing the same things every time, regardless, right? Like there's a lot of research on, for example, like pre-shot routines with field goals for basketball players. You know, they'll like bounce once, step back, throw, whatever it is. And you'll see them like they don't do it, they'll get rushed, or it'll be loud, or it'll be like, you know, hey, the clock's not running, but you're still using that time. And like, you feel like, and their percentages vary quite a bit. So that's what it is like taking all of those things, taking it out, bringing yourself back to the very fundamentals of the kick, like you would do it when no one was watching, taking the time that you need, the steps that you need, and doing it so much that it's robotic, right? And yet you're still keeping your mind proactively engaged in like the simple basics of like plant, foot, follow through, blah, 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 what they are. And then the rest of that stuff will almost become slow and quiet, right? Like that's when the zone is, you're like, the game slows down for me. And that's what it is, because you're literally tuning your mental radio to the attentional focus that pulls you from like all of that and creates almost a bubble.
I actually still have Zane's number from the ASU days. I need to put you in contact with him too. Like you are so, just listening to you, it makes me think about just all these guys I know that are the highest level athletes that deal with so much just noise from social media, from everywhere. And just listening to you, I feel like everyone can learn so much, because it's stuff that a lot of people don't think about. And I think it applies to real life too. Just being able to focus and, you know, get your routine and, you know, block out, especially during COVID times, block out all of the noise and,
and you know, and the interesting thing is, and I tell people this, I'm like, so the reason I got my master's and PhD when I was playing ball is because since there was no trajectory for a woman in football that I could like aspire to coach or any of that, what I believed is I could take my practical experience of being one of the best in the world and combine it with the educational focus to become a unique value proposition to the sport, right? To become somebody who was a mix of theory and practice. Because what's so hard is usually you get all one or all the other. And like, you know, for athletes, for example, how we think about situations is fundamentally different than average population people. And we end up feeling very misunderstood by people who are supposed to be close to us, who might be non-athletes, because their priorities and views of the world don't mesh with ours. So then what happens is, you know, we have kind of our codes and our systems, and, you know, football people, we even have more of those. And like, I go to talk to a non-football person and I'm like, oh, this is way too much work, right? Like I have to do too much like background stuff to even get you to understand how I tie my shoelaces, much less to let you into my mind. You're going to make me feel crazy, right? So they miss a lot. Not that people aren't capable of learning it, but they haven't had to, like, you know, play a game in our cleats. And so it's almost too much work to get somebody to understand you well enough to the point where they could help you. And for me, what's funny is, like, I'll get calls from guys that I never even met, never even coached. And they'll be like, yo, Coach Jan, blah, 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 it's so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, you know, And they're like, yeah, you worked with so-and-so. And he said you were cool. Like you could help me. Like you got a minute. And I'm like, yeah, okay, bet. No, we're good. Because it is different. And it is that trust and being someone who has been exposed to a lot of the different elements of the game. So it's going to feel easy and like a friendly conversation that also can be proactive and positive. Right. And so, yeah, it is different. And there are not a lot of people who have both the experience having competed at that level and also the education. You know, they're like, read a sports psychology book and think that, you know, they've got your mental skills training. And I'm like, could be helpful, but we might need more than like your bucket of 4 things, right? Like your visualization script might not work for me. There may be something else that we have to get to that. And you might not be visual, you might be auditory, you might be, you know, hands-on learning. So, but it is interesting because a lot of the times people don't realize that just because it's a, you know, a focus of sport doesn't make it just simple. It actually makes it more complex, but in different elements because we weight things differently, right? An injury for an athlete, for example, has a career-ending or threatening injury has the psychological weight on an athlete of the death of a close family member. Because it's our social circle, it's our identity, it's how we make money, it's our everything, right? It's our swag, it's what we do, it's who we are. We don't say I play football, we say what? I am a football player. So football goes away and what happens? You just took away my identity, right? And we tend to call that identity foreclosure, which means you're foreclosed into one element of self, right? And the more foreclosed you are, basically, the more likely you are to have something like that trigger an identity crisis. The more multidimensional you are, the more, you know, something else will pick up if one thing goes away, right? But imagine what happens when you have somebody who's been the very best in the world and who is a football player. That's what it is. I am that dude, right? And that dude, by the way, can be a man or a woman. Right? My theme song is Alu Black, I'm the man. So just be easy, right? But that person loses the element of the thing that makes them feel like magic in this world. And then we've been taught never to admit fear, never to admit weakness. Okay? So we're not supposed to open up. We're hurting. We're struggling. We're dealing with, you know, whether it's social media or an injury or whatever, we finally get up the courage to open up. And maybe I tell somebody that I'm really worried about who I am, what I'm going to do, if I'll ever be able to come back. Like I am freaking out on every level inside because of my knee. And maybe I talk to somebody who had a knee injury, but they don't rely on their body. And they say, you'll be fine. I don't understand why you're so upset. And then somebody who I trusted enough to let into my shell just made me feel stupid for how I felt. Guess what happens? Those walls get thicker and we start to feel more separated from the people that we're supposed to be the closest to. And that's when the problems compound, right? Because you just felt like the person who's supposed to, because a lot of the times it's a significant other, right? Or someone's parents, and they just don't understand why it would be so hard on you, right? Because sports wasn't that big to them, right? Like, or they have a desk job, and you know they might have lost their physical ability, but the rest of their life carries on, and they just basically looked at you and said you were crazy for feeling the way that you feel. And that is so often what happens in sports, and why it's hard to pull those things together and pull out of them. Because, you know, even in psychology, there are a lot of people who don't get it, right? Like I have sat in meetings with people who were like supposed to be a guru on this, that, and the other. And I sat there and I was like, I would punch this dude in the mouth if he talked to me like this. I felt like I was talking to the Mr. Rogers of, you know, sports. Like, okay, today we're going to tie our shoe. I'm like, You know, and it makes sense when you're told that somebody's an expert, and then basically the expert doesn't hear you, right, or feel you, and you then become more isolated. It's more likely that you think something's wrong with you. Right. And again, let's go back to, we're taught never to admit fear, never to admit weakness. And now, not only is my knee messed up, but I think my mind's messed up too. I'm sure not going to let anybody see, understand, or come into that circle, because typically everybody who sees us is a competitor, and we're taught never to let anybody see past that competitive spirit. Right. So if I feel weak, what do? Become more aggressive in my defense so that you won't look too closely. So they become, very tough, almost like a perpetuating cycle.
I don't know about you guys, but just everything you're saying, I'm just going through all these people I know in my head and just thinking, this is advice they need to hear, or what they've been trying to preach and what they've been trying to tell people, but they don't understand. And I know we're like an hour over the time that I told you this episode would take, but I think we need to run it back with another episode. Bring Brandon, CJ, bring Brandon McGee back on, who's been very vocal about his mental health post-sports. Bring whoever, because I think it's something that I've never, as a competitive cheerleader, never, played in the sports that I'm working, but it's something that so many people need to hear. And I think that this show's a good platform. It reaches 24 countries now, I think. And you are so important. Brandon's so important. Like, people need to understand that once your guys' identity is taken away, it's more than just, all right, let me retire with all my money. Like, there's a lot that y'all go through, and it's so important to talk about. And we're learning that with Hayden Hurst, with him being so vocal about mental health. I think it's such an important topic, and thank you so much for, sharing your story and being so honest about it.
Yeah, for sure. And it is important for, one of the things about sports that becomes so powerful is people see our careers play out. So they have a vested interest on, what happens if you see a kicker get, miss a kick and then get all that, like it resonates. So being able to use examples like that and open up to other people on how hard it was, or how it felt, or at these times in my life I wasn't okay. To me, that's the true definition of strength, because it gives someone else permission to say, you know what, I'm not okay either. And if he or she can say this was hard, then so can I. And, then we can look at ways to help. I tell people, there were times in my life people thought, I was in the BBC, the Bad Bees Club, right? You couldn't, like, one of the toughest women in the world, right? Played football against dudes. Like, there were, like, I went to Australia and I was the head coach there, and it was like they whispered my name and it was the full name, right? It was Jen Welter, right? And it was like, and when I went to show them stuff, like technique stuff, I figured out that invincibility was actually a liability, because I would tell them, like, you need to do this, and they'd be like, oh, but I can't do that, coach. You can only do that because you're Jen Welter. And I had done such a good job of being larger than life that now it was almost demotivational. And so I literally made every girl on my team, and I say girls like my girls, right? Like, these are grown women, but they're my girls, right? That's our tribe. I made every one of them go through and tell me what my kryptonite was. I said, okay, well, if you believe I'm superhuman, then all superheroes have a weakness. And I made every one of them look at me in that way, so they would have permission to not expect for perfection from themselves, right? But it really does taking up and realizing that true strength isn't never admitting weakness. A a lot of the times it's admitting weakness so that you can empower and strengthen other people.
Yeah, that's super important. And I know both CJ and I can relate on a personal level. When I told you
Still
before we
flashing
started
with the
recording,
ring.
I know it
I
keeps
said he's still flashing the ring.
reflecting. It's like blinding your entire like screen when you do that. So
It's
just hitting
you know,
the
it
light.
just catches the light. It's good. I like rings. I have 6. I get it.
Could
Courtney,
have worn all 6 and just been like, "How's it going, CJ?"
Courtney gets all.
Actually, my rings are all in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
All of them?
The polo, are the khakis there too?
I think they have the khakis, but those aren't on display.
But the polo,
I just thought that stuff could do a lot more good, where girls and women could see that they belong there than like what, sitting in my house, right? Like, because there was no presence there. So all of that stuff is currently in the hall. I mean, I may eventually get some of it back. It's just on loan there, but I kind of feel like on some of the people, although I did used to wear my rings on my middle finger, I just want you to know, because most people didn't realize women played football. So I'd be like, oh yeah, you want to see it? Turn it up.
Yes.
But like now I kind of feel like if people don't know that about me, like I don't need to tell them, right? Like if you don't want to know my story, that might be your loss. But at one point it was the best way that I could get people to talk about football. So we'll see. But
yeah, you've definitely made your mark on the sport. I remember watching in 2015 when you first started with the Cardinals, and I was like, this is one badass woman, like loved every single piece of coverage that people did on you, because you showed them, like you really started the trend. Now there's other women coaches in the league, and it's so important. And you also I will wrap up, and I feel like we do need to bring you back again because you were awesome and I'm having so much fun. I don't want this interview to end. But you do have a couple ventures. I know on Instagram today you posted your partnership with Adidas. You have Play Big, which people can buy on Amazon. Kind of do your spiel on how everybody can keep up with you.
I will. I mean, the partnership with Adidas actually was formed 2 years ago, but it was one of those things that popped back up, and it was like, man, this was such an important moment, right? Like it was the first time Adidas signed a female in football, like to be an athlete rep, right? Like that hadn't happened before. And, I introduced the WNFC, which was founded by some of like my very best friends in the world. And, that was probably like the one time I feel like I've actually like thrown weight that like I was so nervous I didn't even know if it would work, kind of thing. Like, because I was like, because Adidas sponsors the camps too, and I was like, you don't want them coming out on my field as my coaches, wearing some Nike jerseys and like it's an Adidas camp, do you? And they were like, oh yeah, we should look at it. And then of course the women in the WNFC did their thing and they made their case, and but really like I pushed on Timeline because they had another deal that they could have possibly gotten. And I was like I was so nervous. I was like, I can't even believe I said that, because mine wasn't even signed yet, right? Like we were still figuring out like LOI and all this stuff. And I was like, and they were like, and I remember even Odessa was like, Welter, you don't have to do that. Like, don't risk your stuff. And I was like, but if I don't, then who am I? Right? Like I mean, I'm not telling them I won't sign if you don't look at it, but I can get it in the door. So like, let's do it. And then when they, made the commitment to, support the girls camp, support me and support the league, it was like, okay, we're making progress for women in football. And so that's kind of why I posted it today. Cause it was like, one of those memories that came up as the 2 year. And I was like, wow, it's been 2 years, right? Like you just looking for progress. So Adidas has been a great partner. I have, Gridiron Girls are the camps I started. It's now been three years. We've done 35 camps across the country. It was the first national movement for girls in, flag football. Just did a deal with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, with the Hall of Fame Village, which is going to be kind of the movement to like honor the past and look to the future. So the Gridiron Girls home base now is Canton, Ohio, which I said, like, I'm like digging the cleats in the dirt to make sure that girls and women are represented. That's why I said, like, all my stuff's in the building. They can't ignore us. Like, it's there, even if you don't want to admit it. Right. Like, and so the girls, Gridiron Girls has a home base there. And then we're going to be looking to create content around storytelling, of different women in football. And then I'll also be an ambassador for, all the stuff they do there. So it's not like, I'm not just there as like, this is the women's bucket. I'm there for, extending, if you guys are coaching, like, I'm coaching. So the boys get a female on the field, and obviously the guys will be on the field with us too. But so to kind of help create that narrative more. Play Big is my book that talks a lot about the story, kind of centers around the Cardinals. It's a really good reader-friendly life transition book, right? So the goal of that book, especially at that time, like the publishers all said women in football wouldn't sell. So they wouldn't publish it as a football story. They would only publish it if it was a motivational take on my story. So it's very like life lesson oriented. And I actually didn't want to do it because I didn't feel like it was as gritty as it needed to be, but it is a great book. And it builds bridges between some of the football stuff and general. But I think that there's more stories to tell and books to write. So it's a good one to start, I'll just say. But, I still look at those moments as being really important. Like, you tell me a woman in football won't sell, and I'm like, okay, let's get to work. Right?
Yeah, like try me.
That's right. And I did want to turn it down. And one of my friends said, don't turn it down. Just make that the first book. You're always going to be better with the second, third, fourth, but you'll learn from this one. Let that be your lesson book. And I was like, okay. So that is there. I have Critter Fitter, which is a kids book series that I created during COVID, using critters to get kids fitter through motion and emotion. So they move the kids in one book. Busy Bee is like the exercise bug. So they do a dynamic warm up, animal-based exercises of friends of Busies. So like, there's an owl, you ruffle your feathers, we ruffle together. There's an inchworm, so you like crawl, do different stuff, and then a cool down. Then there's When a Ladybug Can't Hug, which is all about social distancing and how you can connect through the heart while staying apart. There's a book called Wearing the Mask Says I Love You, which is the one that's gotten the most pub and pickup because the mask needed a hero story, number one. Number two, these are complex topics, but kids are coachable. So don't just talk away from them or around them. Allow them to be a proactive, positive part of the solution. So we can take something as simple as, and I write all of them. So, something complex that the adults have yet to figure out, like asymptomatic transmission. The virus hops from bug to bug very quick, and bugs can pass it without even feeling sick. Done. Easy. And it rhymes. They're rhymes books because those help kids, stay into reading and development because there's a reward at each end of each sentence. And then it does have all the CDC guidelines. So hand washing, distancing, wearing a mask. And it ends with a call to action. So educators, parents, community leaders can remind the kids. So it becomes a part of the narrative of like, hey kids, Sergeant, who's the leader of the Ant Army, of course, asks them all to join the infantry and put their masks on, right? Like a part of the fight to do what's right. And then the fourth one is called The Resilience. And that one, I didn't realize how many words had ant in it, but characters like Sergeant is back. Brilliant defeats the virus's invisibility because it's hard to fight what you cannot see. We talk about quarantine, antibodies, right? Like, and so it puts all of these things together in a very diverse adventure. We have like Lantern. Okay. Lantern is a firefly who becomes a leader of the ant army. So like, don't We don't discriminate around this piece. It is not all ants in the ant army.
Don't sleep on Lantern.
No. Lantern is actually one of my favorites. He is like the kid's favorite because Lantern leads with full transparency. With lanterns, you get what you see, an idea, thought within something he can't keep hidden. That's right. You can read his mind as his ideas flash bright on his behind.
I'm liking this.
So Lantern literally like ideas flash up on his butt.
I love that.
You know, he is like the new of like of reindeer, right? Like, you know, Rudolph had his red nose to like guide him through. No, Lantern's a little bit more explicit. Like Lantern literally gets pictures up on his firefly light. But my nephew came up with Lantern, so I'm very proud. And like, yeah, he was like, ant words, what about Lantern? And I was like, that boy good, right? Like that boy good. And I wrote it right then, like the ideas flashed right up on his mind and on his behind, right? Like, and so he was thrilled when he did it. So Lantern helps lead them through to like reopening and test and trace and all those things that we could see. So that's been a fun project for me to just help the kids in this time because I have a heart for kids. And I always say my talent is human puzzles, right? Breaking complex things down and making it approachable and digestible to help people, whether it's a football technique or, you know, a psychological one or a kid's book. That to me is the connective tissue.
I love that. And go ahead, CJ.
No, I was just gonna say that I think is what makes you a great coach is because of the fact that you're able to just every single kid, every single person, every single athlete, you're able just to say, what is it that makes that person go? How can I make it so that they go in the exact way that I need them to go, but still get exactly what it is that the team needs, right? And I know that's very hard to do, especially with, kids. It's even harder to do with adults. So, you know, it's awesome that you kind of been able to harness that.
Well, I think in this time, especially, right? Like I like everybody else felt lost, you know, couldn't do my camps, go out and do all the stuff that I'm used to. You know, I'm used to in person. I am a people lover, right? Like I thrive around my people, and to have this time where we're distant, I think I just like so many people wanted a way to help. Like, what could I focus on that was in my control? How could I move the needle? And I had friends that were like, you know, in ICUs. I'm not a doctor. Okay, I can't help. I had friends, one of my friends was globally sourcing PPE. Okay, you a bad mama. I don't know how to do that, right? I had other friends that were sewing masks. Spoiler alert, it would have been like Swiss cheese for me, more harm than good. I don't sew. It's not my skill set, right? And the image I couldn't get out of my mind was as the adults were looking up at these big problems and they were adulting. Like, what about the little kid who's like, I don't get it. I'm scared. What's going on? And I felt like they weren't really getting the love up front. And we found that is, I talked to one of my friends who's on the board of Atlanta Public Schools today. And, she's like, Coach, they just thought it was going to go away. We don't have resources. They really didn't give us these things. And she's like, nobody did what you did. And I was like, well, look, I said, even the publishing companies turned it down. Well, they didn't. They said they'd love to work with me. They could probably have them out in a year. And I was like, a year? We need this yesterday. This is right now stuff. So we ended up self-publishing just to really be able to move the needle for people. And so those are drop ship on Amazon, Critter Fitter. I'm from the South. That's how we have critters. And I couldn't think of anything else that rhymed with fitter.
Well, I think that's so amazing that you're doing that. Like CJ said, it's so needed. And especially now with the kids reading the letters that people have been posting, letters kids have been writing to Santa Claus. Just so sad this year. Like, just bring my parents something to pay the bills. I don't want presents, but bring them this. People forget about the kids in all of this, and it's so special what you're doing. And I cannot wait to promote the heck out of this episode, because no matter if you're an athlete, a kid, a parent, whoever, I feel like your episode and your story is going to touch and inspire and motivate so many people. And I cannot thank you enough for being on the show. I know this is not the last time the three of us will speak, but
Sure.
Thank you so much. It's getting dark for all of us. The lighting has just like gone down. Are you taking a selfie right now?
Yeah, I am. Okay, here we go. Ready? Everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Jen, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your holiday season. And I look forward to staying connected on social media and just following the million other things that you're doing.
Absolutely. And just tag me stuff and let me know. I always tell people, like, they always want to know how to do stuff or like this, that, the other. I'm like, if I'm doing something that you want to be a part of, just like coach, right? Like, I just get busy. Like, I get tunnel vision. Like, just tell me, right? Like, tag me in it or say, hey, I want to help, or that's interesting. And I'm like, cool, it's party. If it's my party, I bring my friends with me. So, just make sure that you hit me up, let me know, and tag me and stuff so I can amplify it.
Will do. Let's do it. Well, have a great rest of your week. Have a great holiday season, and stay in touch.
See you later.
Absolutely. Later.